My son smiled across the table and said, "Dad, stop pretending you're still relevant. Everyone knows you're done," while his wife smirked. But when I announced my new investment earnings, he nearly dropped his glass. His confidence shattered. "Before I begin, tell me where you're watching from. What city, what street, what small kitchen or quiet room? Because I want to know who's hearing this with me tonight. I want to know who's ever sat at a table and felt the air go cold even though the soup was still steaming. I want to know who has learned, the hard way, that silence can be heavier than any shout. I was not in a big hall, not on a stage. I was sitting at the oak table I bought 27 years ago, the one my wife polished on Sunday afternoons, while the radio played songs she loved. The candles flickered, the lake breeze came through the open window and moved the curtains like slow breath. And my son, my own boy, smiled at me from across the plates and forks, leaned back as if he was the king of his own small world, and said, "Dad, stop, pretending you're still relevant. Everyone knows you're done." He said it like it was a new joke in an old group chat. His wife smirked, quick and sharp, and dipped her spoon back into the soup, like she was stirring what he'd just said into the night. My hand didn't shake, not on the outside. Inside, something went very still, like when a pond freezes over and you can see the fish trapped underneath, slow and silent and waiting. I looked at him the way I used to look at contracts, steady, careful, no need to rush. He had my eyes but none of my patience. He wore a narrow tie, as if it was proof of wisdom. The glass in his hand caught the light and threw it in small pieces across the tablecloth. That light hit the wedding band on his finger, and for a second, I saw another ring, the one I slid onto his mother's hand in a small room, where we laughed because the cake was crooked and the flowers were late, but none of that mattered. Everyone knows you're done. It's funny how a line can feel rehearsed. It sits too comfortably in the mouth. It waits for the perfect night, the perfect audience, and then it steps out like a dancer. I heard it, I took it in, and I let the moment breathe. "Is that what everyone says?" I asked him in a flat voice, the one that made men at long tables lean forward because they understood what it meant. He blinked, a small, quick shudder over his confidence, and then grinned again. "Come on, Dad," he said. "It's not a crime to admit time passes. You've had your run." I thought of time then, not as an enemy, but as a long road with a lot of small mile markers that most people miss. Time was the first apartment I rented with your mother, the one with the thin walls and the neighbor who sang in the shower. Time was your first fever, and the way your mother slept on the floor by your crib, her hand through the bars, holding your tiny fingers until your breathing turned soft again. Time was me coming home late with the smell of printer ink and cheap coffee on my coat, and your little arms going around my neck anyway, because none of that mattered to you. Time was the day you learned to ride a bicycle and looked back at me to see if I was watching, because victory meant less if I wasn't there to count it. I did count it. I counted all of it. I counted the missed dinners and the quiet mornings and the way your mother would stand by the window and say, "He needs you to teach him the difference between being loud and being strong." She knew words better than I did. She still does, even now. I could almost hear her tonight, as if she were sitting in her old chair with that shawl she loved, telling me to keep my voice low and my eyes open and my hands steady. You know how a room can split into two rooms? The one where your body sits and the other where your memory stands and watches? I sat in the room where the soup cooled and my son grinned and his wife smirked, but I was also in the room where the past still held shape. In that second room, my wife was alive. She was humming as she set out plates for a birthday dinner we could barely afford, but we made it look special with candles and folded napkins and a ribbon around the chair where our boy would sit. In that room, she said, "You will never be done as long as he needs you," and I nodded like a soldier receiving orders. In that room, I promised I would build something steady beneath our feet so that he could run without falling. I took that promise and I worked it into every hour of my life. People think relevance is a stage and a microphone. They think it's applause. They forget that relevance is also a light left on in the window when a boy gets home late. It's a steady hand on the steering wheel when the rain turns the road into a mirror. It's saying no to the people who want to pay you fast because you see something slow and better. It's knowing when to be the wall and when to be the door. Back in the first room, my son pushed his plate a little, as if he had already eaten enough of being polite. His wife cleared her throat, polite in a sharp way. "We're only saying," she said, "that times change. Like, Take the villa. It's cute that you're attached to it, but honestly, it's old-fashioned. We could sell it while the market is hot and get something, you know, modern. She looked around my dining room like a realtor walking through an empty house. She didn't notice the small dent on the table edge where my son hit it with a toy truck when he was 3, or the scratch in the floor by the window where I dragged the Christmas tree one winter while laughing because it was too big and the pine needles stuck to my sweater. She saw space, not history. She saw wood and paint, not a home. My son nodded, eager now that she had set the point. "Exactly," he said. "You should relax, Dad. Let us handle things. You can move into a smaller place, something easy. We'll take care of the details." He spoke like he was offering me a soft pillow and not a hard push out the door. I took a slow sip of water and looked at the window. Outside, the lake was dark and calm. You could not tell how deep it was by looking. You had to know it. "You'll take care of the details," I repeated. The words felt like a pebble in my mouth. He laughed and swung his foot under the table like a boy again. "You don't have to worry about numbers," he said. "That's more my world now anyway. The market is different. Digital this, digital that. It's not your era. There are things you can't see." His wife tilted her head. "Maybe it's time to let go. You earned your rest." She said it as if rest was a nursery rhyme and not a small coffin people build for living men they don't want to hear from anymore. I set my glass down gently. I know the sound a glass makes when it hits wood with intention. It's a quick note, quiet but final. The candles bent a little in a draft. Somewhere in the house, a pipe ticked as if the building itself was listening and taking notes. "You think I can't see," I said, still in that calm voice my wife liked, because it meant I was not going to say something I would regret. "You think I don't understand how things move now." He shrugged, spreading his hands, a performer showing empty palms. "It's okay to accept limits," he said, and then he smiled that small smile that lives in the corners of the mouth and never reaches the eyes. "We're family, Dad. We'll do right by you." The words "do right by you" sat on the table like heavy coins no one wanted to pick up. I am not an actor. I don't have a script. What I have is the habit of watching. I watched his shoes, the leather too clean, the pride in the shine. I watched the twitch in his jaw when he said, "We'll take care of it," as if he liked the taste of the phrase and wanted to say it again. I watched his wife's hands, thin, fast, the way she slid her phone closer to her plate as if the world inside the screen would clap for every sentence they served me. I watched the door too, not because I wanted to leave, but because remembering where the doors are is something men like me learn early. I remembered the safe tucked where no guest would ever look. I remembered the drives up before dawn, the meetings in quiet rooms where people do not raise their voices because the numbers are louder than any opinion. I remembered the old friends who knew that men who speak softly are not always men who move slowly. I remembered my wife's last week, how she placed my hand on the quilt and said, "When he thinks he knows everything, don't try to shout wisdom into him. Show him the shape of it." She had a way of putting instructions into simple words. Show him the shape of it. I carried that sentence like a folded note in my pocket for years. "Dad," my son said, leaning forward now that he believed the conversation had been won. "We found a buyer who's ready to move, all cash, clean exit. You could be in a new place by next month. So, let's not drag this. Sign the papers this week. We'll handle the rest." He was already closing the door on my life while still sitting at my table. I looked at his face and I saw flashes. The boy who cried when his kite got stuck in the maple tree. The teenager who asked me how to tie a tie. The young man who stopped calling for a while because he had new people to impress, and the old man in his world had become a mirror he didn't like. I could have said many things. I could have told him about nights on office couches and the long wait for payments that came late. I could have told him how the villa saved us one winter when everything else went dark, because it gave us a view of the water and reminded us that some things keep moving no matter what. I could have said, "No," in a loud voice and hit the table with my open hand. Instead, I breathed and let that quiet cold I knew so well settle into my bones. "After dinner," I said, "I'll show you something." His wife laughed, not kindly. "Oh, a photo album?" she said, half hiding the smile with her napkin. "Cute." She glanced at my son as if to confirm the joke had landed. He smirked back. It was a small duet they had learned well. I looked at the clock, listening to its soft click, and felt a strange peace. I knew the next hour would be a long hallway. I knew how to walk it. The soup had gone cold. The breadbasket sat between us like a small, tired moon. I broke a piece of bread and ate it slowly. The way your jaw moves when you chew can tell people more than your words. It can say, "I am in no hurry." It can say, "I am not the one who should be nervous." I chewed and looked out the window and watched a late boat cross the water with a single lamp. Whoever was out there was going somewhere. Steady, sure. I wish them an easy landing. "Don't be upset, Dad," my son said, and reached for the wine as if to refill my glass. His hand bumped the bottle and it wobbled and my glass trembled. A bright ring of red touching the rim and holding there, not spilling, like a held breath. He caught it with a small swear and laughed, relieved. "See? Even the wine's on edge," he said, and they both giggled the way people do when they think the hardest part is over. I kept my eyes on the glass for a second because it told me something about balance. Small things have a way of teaching big lessons if you let them. The glass steadied. I set my napkin down and looked at him with the same eyes that watched him cross schoolyards and run into waves and step onto planes. "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm listening." The 3 words landed differently. He paused, confused by my calm, and then shrugged again, choosing confidence like a jacket he could pull tighter around himself. While they spoke, the night built small walls of sound around us. The hum of the refrigerator, the sigh of the curtains, the tick of the clock, the soft rinse of water on the rocks outside. My wife used to call those kind sounds. She said they reminded her that the world has its own rhythm, and we are only one instrument in the band. I heard those sounds now, and felt her hand on my shoulder, the way she would rest it there when she wanted me to remember who I was. The urge to defend myself rose and passed. I didn't need to defend what time had already proved. Instead, I looked at my son and asked a quiet question. "Do you remember the summer after you finished school, when you said you wanted to try your own business?" He rolled his eyes, already bored by the path he thought I was taking. "Dad, please, we're not doing nostalgia." I nodded as if he were right, then said, "You came to me and asked for help. Do you remember what your mother said?" He hesitated. A small crease appeared between his brows, the same place a crease would form when he was a child trying to solve a hard puzzle. "She said," he began, then shook his head, "it doesn't matter. She said, let him walk on his own feet, but make sure the floor is solid." I didn't put any moral weight on it. I said it like weather. "I didn't tell you then what the floor was made of. I didn't need to. You just needed to learn how to walk on it." He gave a soft snort. "Thanks, Dad." And I did walk. Which is kind of my point. You can rest now. You don't have to keep pretending you're steering the ship. I let a smile touch my mouth. It didn't reach my eyes either, but for a different reason. "I never pretended to steer it," I said. "I just made sure it had a keel." He stared at me as if I had spoken a language he used to know. Then his phone buzzed and the moment broke like thin ice under a careless foot. He looked down, typed something fast, and looked up with new energy. "Anyway," he said, "we're meeting the agent on Thursday. All you need to do is sign." His wife added, "And pack. We can send movers on Sunday. We'll handle the costs, of course." Of course. I watched their teamwork, the quick passing of the ball. I admired the smoothness, the confidence. Confidence is a useful thing. It helps you run. It can also make you miss the hole in the road. I stood up slowly, and their eyes followed me, curious. I took the candle snuffer, an old brass bell on a stick, and lowered it over one flame. The wick made a small thread of smoke that rose, thin and gray, and smelled like the end of a song. Then I did the same to the other candle. "It's getting late," I said, voice still low, still even. "Let's clear the plates, then I'll show you what I mentioned." My son laughed again, a little too loud now. "Sure, Dad," he said. "Show us the big reveal." We carried dishes to the sink. The warm water ran over my hands and took the chill out of my fingers. I stacked the plates the way my wife taught me so the edges wouldn't chip. I dried them and set them back in the cupboard where they belonged. Small rituals matter when big things go wrong. They keep your spine straight. When the last fork was back in its place, I wiped the table with long, slow strokes until it shone. I could see our faces reflected there, just a little, his eager, hers tight with interest, mine calm as a winter lake. "This way," I said, and led them down the hall where the lights were dim and the floorboards knew the sound of my step better than any song. I opened a door they never bothered with and switched on the small lamp. The room smelled like paper and cedar. My wife loved cedar. She said it kept moths away and brought forests in. In the hush of that room, I felt the familiar weight of the years. I reached for the drawer that stuck a little and pulled it open with 2 fingers, then took out a key that didn't look important. Keys never do. I turned to my son, and his smile had shrunk to something watchful. Good? At last, he was ready to pay attention. The key felt small in my palm, the way small things do when everything around them is big and heavy. The room was close and quiet, cedar and paper in the air, a thin layer of dust catching the lamplight like frost. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, trying to look bored. His wife hovered at his shoulder as if she was watching a show and didn't want to miss the best line. "So," he said, "is this where you keep the family stories?" His voice was light, but I heard the tap of his heel on the floor. He was timing me, as if patience were a test he could grade. I crouched by the old cabinet, the one everyone thought was just a place to store winter scarves, and slid the shelf forward until the hidden panel showed itself. It stuck, as always. I used the flat of my hand and a small push of my thumb, and it moved with a soft sigh. The safe wasn't a movie prop. It wasn't shiny. It was squat and gray and ordinary, the way strong things often are. I put the key in and turned it without drama. A slow click, another. I opened the door, and the smell of metal and sealed air rolled out. Inside, there were envelopes with rubber bands, a leather folder rubbed soft at the corners, a small wooden box, and a black notebook with a stretch of elastic holding it shut. It looked like a drawer in a quiet mind. My son made a show of smiling. "Vintage?" he said. His wife laughed under her breath. I didn't answer. I took out the leather folder and set it on the desk. The wood had a shallow scratch across it. Your mother's ring did that when she reached for a pen one winter, and we both laughed because she apologized to furniture like it was a person. I untied the folder and took out a thin stack of documents. The first page had a name that used to make my wife's eyes shine: Lake House Family Trust. I slid it across the desk until it nudged my son's fingers. He looked down, then back up at me, then down again, his smile loosening a little. "What is this?" he asked. His tone tried for casual. It didn't land. "Something your mother and I built," I said. "The floor we asked you to walk on without telling you what it was made of." I tapped the top right corner. "Look at the date." He squinted. 7 years ago, he said. He looked at me again, sharper now. "After she got sick." "After she got brave," I said. "Braver than I knew how to be some days." I slid my finger down the page and stopped at a paragraph marked in blue. I didn't read it for him. I let his eyes do the work. People trust what they read out of their own mouth more than anything a voice gives them. He read the clause once fast, and then again, slower. His wife leaned in and read with him, her hair falling forward like a curtain. "It says the villa can't be sold while you're alive," she said, her voice thin. "Not without your direct consent as trustee." "It says more than that," I said. "Read the next line." She did, and her mouth closed as if it had reached a door it didn't expect. My son cleared his throat. "If you ever step down as trustee," he read, "the property transfers to the foundation in Mom's name to be used as a retreat for widows and children, not to me." He let the last 3 words sit on his tongue like something sour. "Not to me," he repeated softer. "Your mother wanted the house to keep being a house," I said. "Not a chip on a table. She said a home should keep working after a person stops. That was her rule. We wrote it down." He looked up with the old hurt in his eyes, the one that lives under a son's lids when he hears his mother's name and feels both love and loss at the same time. For a second, the man in him stepped back and the boy showed through. Then pride pulled the curtain closed. "We can challenge that," he said. "If it was made when she was weak." "She was never weak," I said, quiet but firm. "And if you try, you will learn how strong a signature can be when it's made by a woman who knew exactly what she was doing." I tapped the notary seal, the registration number, the second copy from the county office. "It's filed. It's clean. I told you at the table, don't hurry. The ground under you deserves more respect than that." He swallowed, His wife's eyes hardened the way glass does when you cool it fast. "You could still sell," she said. "You could still choose to." I nodded. I could. I let the words hang and didn't give them a friend to lean on. The silence was simple and complete. You'd be surprised how much force lives inside it. I put the trust back in the folder and placed a new envelope on the desk. It was brown and a little wrinkled, the kind of envelope lawyers like because it doesn't care about looking pretty. Inside it were 3 letters on thick paper and a stack of statements. I didn't push those to him, not yet. I took out the black notebook and looped the elastic off with my thumb. The pages were lined, the ink dark. My handwriting hasn't changed in 40 years. I wrote like I built, neat, steady, leaving room in the margins for what might come later. "Do you remember when you told me to stop buying old-fashioned things?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the page. "When you said the future was only screens?" He snorted and then caught himself. "Dad, everything runs on screens." I nodded. "Everything runs on something," I said. "Screens run on wires. Wires run on copper. Copper runs through people's hands. Those hands belong to companies. Those companies need roofs that don't leak and trucks that keep food cold and rooms full of batteries that do not catch fire. I didn't stop building when I left the office. I changed my hammer." I flipped the pages slowly. "3 winters ago," I said, "I met a man who built warehouses near the highway. He was not loud. He wore boots to meetings. He showed me a map and he showed me what happens to food when roads flood in spring. He said, 'I don't build fast things. I build things that stop food from going bad.' He asked me to be quiet money, the kind that doesn't want its name on a wall. I said yes." I turned another page. 2 summers ago, I sat in a clinic waiting room while a boy cried because the air outside made his chest hurt. A woman sat beside me with her head in her hands. On the TV, they were talking about power cuts, how clinics lose vaccines when the lights go out. A week later, I met a woman who built small power plants behind clinics. She said, "I don't build flashy things. I build things that keep fridges humming when big grids go dark." She asked me to be patient money, the kind that waits for a steady return and doesn't flirt with drama. I said yes. Another page. "Last spring, a friend called me from a railway yard. He said, 'The ports are full. We need more places to put the containers while the ships wait. We need rails that don't buckle in heat.' He asked me to be boring money, the kind that many people do not see until it's the only thing holding a door closed in a storm. I said yes." My son shifted from one foot to the other. "What are you saying, Dad? That you made a few side investments? You could have told me." I looked up and held his gaze. "I didn't need applause," I said. "And you didn't need pressure. You had your road to try. I had mine." He rolled his eyes. His wife folded her arms. "This is about your pride," she said, "not ours." I smiled a little. "Pride is loud," I said. "What I have is not." I tapped the thick paper in the envelope. "What I have pays the bills of people who don't know my name. It keeps lights on and fruit cold and trains. Moving. It's slow, it's steady, it's not interested in being handsome, but it is interested in staying." I opened one letter and read a single line silently, then closed it again. I placed the envelope back beside the notebook and reached into the safe for the small wooden box. It was carved by a man who used to sell his work by the roadside. My wife loved it. Inside were a silver pen, a photo, and a ring she wore on Sundays. I took the photo and held it so they could see. It was your mother at the dining table, a blue scarf over her shoulders, signing the trust papers. Her smile was not soft. It was set. She looked like a person building a bridge. My son's shoulders dropped a little. He reached out and touched the corner of the photo and pulled his hand back as if the past were warmer than he expected. "She didn't tell me," he said. "She didn't need to," I answered. "She told me. I told the clerk. We told the law. The rest is just talking." He blew out a breath and tried to laugh it off. "Okay," he said, the word scraping its knuckles on the floor. "So the house is complicated. Fine. But the world isn't just houses. The market is big. New money moves fast. You can't expect to be part of that. Not now." He tried to hand me a soft landing and a hard edge at the same time. I let both fall. "You talk about speed like it's virtue," I said. "Speed is a tool. So is weight. So is rhythm. I did not stop learning when you stopped looking." I put the notebook in his hand. He didn't want to take it, but he did. The elastic hung between his fingers like a question mark. "Open to the page with the blue tab," I said. He opened it and stared at a short list of names and numbers. They weren't long names. There were no rockets or neon words or cute mascots. There were companies that moved things and cooled things and fixed things. "This is boring," he said without meaning to, and then flushed. "Yes," I said. "That's why it works." His wife leaned over the page, and I watched her eyes narrow, the way they do when a person is doing math they didn't expect to find in a story. "What are these returns?" she asked, soft now, the tone people use at an altar. "You'll see," I said. "But not in this room. This room is for paper and memory. Let's go back to the table. The lake wants to listen." We walked back down the hall. Our steps sounded like 3 different ideas arguing in low voices. In the dining room, the candles were dark and the window held a square of night. The lake had turned from black to silver around the rocks. I put the envelope in the center of the table, the way a dealer puts a deck down, just so. My son didn't sit right away. He stood and rocked on his heels and looked at the window and then at the door, measuring exits. His wife sat and folded her hands because she understood that sitting can be power too. I took my chair and set my palms flat on the wood. "You used a good phrase earlier," I said. "You said, 'We'll take care of you.' It's a lovely phrase when it's true, but often it hides a small theft." He smiled without teeth. "Come on, Dad." "No," I said, and the no didn't have a second word after it. It didn't need one. I slid the first letter from the envelope and turned it so it faced them. The bank name was at the top. He recognized it. Everyone does. "This is a dividend statement," I said. "Quarterly." He shrugged. "So?" "So," I answered, "when you speak of relevance, you should know what a thing does when no one is looking. This is what my money does at night." He put his finger on the number and didn't say it out loud. He read it twice. He blinked, the way you blink when your eyes are dry and your pride is hot. "This quarter?" he asked. "Yes," I said. His wife leaned in, lips parted, not smiling now. Her breath left a small patch of fog on the glass over the table's framed photo of our family from 10 years ago. She didn't notice. "And there are more?" she asked. "Letters, statements. Not one?" I nodded. "Several, from different places, boring places that never sleep." He reached for the second letter without asking. He wasn't a boy anymore in that reach. He was a man who suddenly wanted to stand on bedrock. He read. His mouth made a small shape that wasn't quite a word. He set it down and lifted the third letter. The paper made a sound like dry wings. He read that one too, and this time he said nothing at all. Silence does a lot of jobs. In that moment, it did the job of knocking on the door of his belief. I reached for the black notebook again and opened to a page with a photo stapled to it. Me and 2 partners standing in front of a long white building by the highway, the sun high, our shadows short. Behind us, trucks backed into docks. The air looked like heat and diesel and work. I slid it over to him. "I didn't pretend to be done," I said. "I simply stopped telling you what I was still doing." He sank into the chair finally, as if his legs had made a quiet decision. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. "When I said you should get out of the way?" I looked at his hands. They were clean and strong and a little careless. "Because you needed to hear yourself say it," I answered. "And because one day you would need to hear me not answer." He rubbed his finger along the edge of the first letter, as if the paper might change its mind if he worried it enough. His wife found her voice again. "If this is true," she said, and then stopped because she heard how it sounded. "It is true," I said, not unkind. "You're seeing it. The seeing is the proof." I stood and went to the kitchen and came back with water for all 3 of us. My wife always said, "You should put water between people when the talk grows hot. It cools the words." I set the glasses down carefully. "I invited you for dinner for a reason," I said, and their eyes flicked up, curious and wary. "You thought you invited yourselves to take the house, but I cooked because I wanted you fed when you found out what you were stepping on." I tapped the table. "You like modern, so do I. Modern runs on old bones. Someone has to keep the bones strong." He looked at the window again. A fish jumped and made a ring that widened and thinned and became the lake again. He swallowed. "I said something ugly," he said, the words low, as if he didn't want to wake whatever part of himself had said them. "Yes," I answered. "You did." I didn't pat him. I didn't throw him a rope he hadn't asked for. He stared at the letters and then pushed one back toward me. "So, what does this mean?" he asked. "What do you want?" I let the question hang. a bell in quiet air. I want you to stop pretending that love and money are the same argument, I said. And I want you to learn what work sounds like when it doesn't need to announce itself. He nodded once, twice, not yet agreement, just motion. His wife tried again, softer now, a different instrument. We didn't know, she said. You didn't look. She trailed off. Loud, I offered. Shiny? She smiled a tired smile. Yes, she said, almost whispering. You didn't look like money. Good, I said. Money shouldn't look like anything. It should do like something. I gathered the letters and stacked them. The stack was not tall. It didn't need to be. There's one more thing, I said. You said the market is big. You're right. But the part you can see is not the whole of it. I don't buy lights. I buy the things that make the lights possible. I reached into the envelope and took out a single sheet. It wasn't a letter. It was a schedule. Dates, distributions. The kind of sheet people call boring and then frame quietly when no one's watching. I didn't push it to him yet. I set it by my hand like a bookmark. When you told me I was done, I said, I thought of your first bicycle. You fell on the gravel and came to me with blood on your knee. You said you were done. Your mother washed the cut and kissed your hair and sent you back out. You were angry. I was quiet. You got on the bike and rode to the end of the street and didn't look back. I don't need you to look back now. I need you to look down and see what you're standing on. He took a long drink of water and set the glass down so gently it made no sound at all. His face had changed in small ways. The corners of his mouth had lost their habit of lifting before the mind did. His eyes had a new weight in them, not defeat, gravity. He looked at his wife. She didn't smirk. She watched him as if for the first time she was trying to guess the shape of his thinking. He looked back at me. Show me, he said. All of it. I nodded. We will go piece by piece, I said. And you will ask good questions. And when you are tired, we will stop and sleep. And in the morning, the lights will still turn on. The trucks will still run. The rails will still hold. That's what good work does. I touched the schedule with 2 fingers and slid it an inch. The lamp made a soft ring on the wood around its base. Outside, a night bird called once and then again. I clasped my hands and felt the old bones in my fingers find their rest. There is a number you want to hear, I said, looking at him, not the paper. But numbers are only doors. What matters is the room they open into. If I give you the number before you understand the room, you will think the door is the point. He nodded, slower now, thinking before agreeing. All right, he said. Then show me the room first. I smiled, small and real. Good, I said. We'll start with the walls. We began with the walls, not the kind you can touch, but the kind you can lean on. I drew a square in the condensation on my water glass and said, This room has 4. He watched my finger like a boy watches a match being struck. First wall, I said. Cash that comes when you're asleep, not dreams. Deposits. I nodded at the envelope. Second wall, things that people will need even when trends change. Cold food, clean light, steady rails. I tapped the black notebook. Third wall, patience, the kind that doesn't clap when it wins. And the fourth wall, I pointed toward the hallway, toward the cedar room that still smelled like her. The promise your mother made me keep. We keep what keeps us. He breathed out slowly, as if matching his lungs to the rhythm I set. His wife sat straighter, eyes on the paper, like a cat watching a closed door. Now, I said, the door. I slid the schedule sheet into the light. Dates, columns, small numbers that only look small until you add them sideways and realize they make a bridge. His finger hovered over the latest line. He didn't touch it. He was afraid that touching it might wake something. This is today, I said. The quarter closed. The audit signed. The board approved. My phone, face down on the table, buzzed once against the wood. The sound was a coin dropped in a quiet church. No one moved. I turned it over. A new message from the bank, the kind with a subject line that doesn't use adjectives. I didn't open it right away. I let the small weight of it sit between us. You said I was done, I said, and the lamp made a ring around the words as if it wanted to hold them steady. Tonight is a good night to test that sentence. He reached for his wine, as if to put his hand somewhere it knew the shape of. His fingers tapped the stem, and for a second the glass tilted like a tall tree in wind. He caught it, just. And I saw his throat move. He smiled to pretend he meant to do it. The smile fell. Open it, he said. The voice of a man who, thinks the worst thing in the world is waiting. I did. The email was short. It named the account. It named the transaction. It listed the figure as a row of digits that looked like a road lit by small lights, each one bright and firm. I turned the phone so he could read without my voice pushing the numbers through his ears. He leaned in. His wife leaned in after him. Their breaths moved the surface of the water in their glasses. He read. He blinked. For a moment, everything in the room softened. The table edges, the clock tick, the air between us, as if the number had put a hand over the mouth of the world. "How much?" she asked, but the question was late. He'd already said it in his head. He swallowed like a man who'd tried to drink the lake. The base of his glass thudded softly back onto the table. "That's this quarter?" he managed. "No sale? No exits? Just earnings?" I nodded once. "Work," I said. "The kind that returns what it promised." He touched the schedule with a fingertip. Careful now, respectful. His wife frowned, counting, fast and quiet. "And this is only one account?" she asked. "One of several," I said. Her eyes flicked to me, then down. She had no smirk left to wear. He tried to laugh, but laughter needs air, and the room had none to spare. "You should have told me," he said, the sentence falling in pieces. When I said," he didn't finish. "There are some bridges you can only cross by walking through your own silence." I let him. The clock ticked. Somewhere near the rocks, a fish rose and fell, turning a ring of silver into a straight line again. "I don't like tricks," he said finally. "This isn't a trick," I answered. "It's a ledger." I tapped the schedule. "You don't have to like it, you only have to read it." He read. He reached the bottom of the page and then went back to the top, like a man who doesn't trust stairs unless he takes them twice. "Say it," I told him. He looked at me, then down again. His lips shaped the number. He didn't push it into the air. He kept it with him. Where shame lives and pride hides, and boys become men if they're lucky. His wife spoke instead, drifting towards safe ground. "It's impressive," she said, trying for neutral. "Mature portfolios can do that." "Mature," I repeated softly, and I smiled because the word was honest, even if she didn't mean it that way. "Yes," I said. "Mature, things that have learned the shape of their work." He lifted his glass again without looking, and almost lost it outright this time. A long, thin wave ran up the bowl and hung there, trembling, making a lip of wine against the rim. He steadied it with both hands. The tiny movement in his jaw, the little pulse by his ear, those told the truth he didn't want to say. He set the glass down carefully, 2 hands, like a man putting a sleeping child into a bed. "I thought I knew where you ended," he said, and the sentence came out a little broken, a little human. "I didn't think—" He shook his head. "I didn't think there was still—" He didn't say power. He didn't say weight. He settled on the easiest word. "More." "There is always more in quiet rooms," I said. "If you listen." I slid another letter into the light. Another bank, different logo, different digits. Same grammar. Work, audit, approval, credit. He didn't touch this one. He looked at it the way a man looks at a shoreline after a storm, checking what is still there. "This is what I am," I said. "Not a show, not a speech, a pattern." He nodded once, twice, like a boxer settling into a stance he hasn't used in a while. "What do you want from me?" he asked. The right question, at last. I took a breath and let the old ache in my chest resolve itself into something simple. "Attention," I said. "Respect, not the bowing kind, the listening kind, and a promise that when you talk about the house your mother loved, you remember it is a promise printed in a clerk's ink, not a wish on your tongue." He sat back. The chair creaked. The room had shifted by an inch, maybe 2. Small shifts matter. They change where the weight lands. His wife smoothed her napkin and said, "Careful now. We were wrong to come in hot." I nodded. "Heat has its place. Kitchens, foundries, not dining tables where vows were made." She glanced at the photo by the window. Us 3, 10 years younger. Your mother's scarf bright against winter light. "She would have liked this," she said, meaning the calm, the numbers, the proof. "She liked things that held," I said, "even when the hands changed. I reached for the wooden box again and took out the silver pen. It had weight. It wrote like a church bell sounds, full, round, without drama. I set it between us. "This pen signed the trust," I said. "It can also sign something else." He tensed, instinctive, waiting for a trap. I spread my fingers, palms open. "Not a trap," I said. "A door. You wanted to handle the details." "Good. There are details that need handling, not the sale of the house. The running of the foundation in your mother's name. The clinic's power program is expanding. They need someone to sit on a board that actually meets, not just claps. The rail yard needs a cost of heat plan by January. The warehouses need a young voice who knows what a screen can do when a truck is late. You wanted modern? Make modern useful. If you can do that, you will not need to ask about relevance again. It will breathe through you." He stared at the pen. The pen stared back. "You're offering me work," he said, as if tasting the edges of the word for the first time in months. "I'm offering you a way to stand on the floor you wanted to tear up," I said. "You can stamp on it, or you can learn its beams and carry the next one." He looked at his wife. She looked at him. There was something fragile and true in that look, a note from a song they hadn't played in a while. "It's not what we planned," she said to him, low, "but it's real." He let out a breath that seemed to leave by 3 doors at once. "What would I do?" he asked me. "Listen," I said. "Count. Visit. Stay late when the late matters. Tell the truth when the numbers are wrong, and when someone older than you speaks softly, do not mistake it for emptiness." He nodded, too fast, eager to rebuild the bridge, then checked himself and nodded once more, slower. "Okay," he said, "if you'll have me." "It's not whether I'll have you," I said. "It's whether the work will. It tends to make up its own mind." He smiled, small, grateful without saying the word. He reached for the silver pen, then stopped with his hand over it, as if waiting for permission that had already been given. He picked it up anyway. It fit his hand like a tool, not a trophy. I poured more water. The lake air had shifted. Pine, damp stone, night flowers. I remembered your mother opening the window on evenings like this and saying the house needed to hear the outside so it didn't forget it was part of the world. "One more thing," I said. "You talked about selling the villa to buy something modern. Let me tell you what modern looks like to me." He waited. "Modern is a freezer that doesn't fail in July because the substation 3 towns over blew a fuse. Modern is a rail that stays straight at 42 degrees because we spent extra on the alloy no one wants to pay for until the tracks curl. Modern is a house that becomes a retreat for people with grief so thick they can't breathe, and they come here, buy this water, and remember air. That was your mother's idea of modern. If you want a new kind of sofa, buy one. But do not touch her idea." His throat worked. He nodded, fast then slow again, learning the new rhythm. He cleared his throat. "Pride is a stubborn animal. It doesn't go quietly." "I said you weren't relevant," he murmured. "I was cruel." "You were careless," I said. "Cruelty is a habit. Carelessness is a moment. Moments can be repaired." He flinched at the word habit, relieved by the word moment. "Then let me repair one," he said, looking at the photo by the window. He stood, took the frame gently, and brought it back to the table, as if it were made of something softer than glass. He set it beside the schedule. "She should be in the room while we talk," he said, and the sentence had no performance in it at all, just light. I turned the frame so it faced all 3 of us. The scarf in the photo was the color of deep water at noon. Her eyes were laughing at something I had just said. She used to laugh at my worst jokes so they wouldn't be lonely. "All right," I said, and my voice had to climb a small hill to get the word out. "Then we'll talk." Like she's listening. His wife touched the corner of the frame with a fingertip. "I'm sorry," she said to the picture, not to me, and I liked her more for that. Sorry means more when you don't aim it like a strategy. The phone buzzed again. Another email, another account, another row of digits that turned doubt into furniture. I didn't even need to show them that one. The room already knew. He smiled at the sound, a small, surprised smile, like the first time a baby sees snow. "It's real," he said. "It keeps coming." "That's what engines do when you build them right," I said. "They hum. They don't shout." He reached for his glass one more time, and this time his hand was steady. He didn't drink. He just held it, as if to remind his fingers they could be trusted. "Tell me about the clinics," he said. The right question again. Good. They used to lose vaccines during outages, I said. We put in battery rooms with guardians. The guardians are old women who used to run their kitchens like fortresses. We pay them. They guard the batteries like they guard soup in winter. Nothing spoils on their watch. He smiled despite himself. And the rails? We learned from a summer that bent more steel than a blacksmith, I said. We dug deeper beds. We cooled the joints at night. We hired the men no one listens to, the ones who know the sound a rail makes 5 minutes before it lies down in the heat. We listen to them now. He nodded. Warehouses? We keep fruit honest, I said. We keep medicines upright. We keep long trucks moving like patient whales. He leaned back and let the picture into his eyes. His wife sat with her palms on the table, fingers open, the way a person holds water without a cup. I don't know if I deserve this, he said. You don't, I said, and he blinked, startled, hurt. And then, because tonight was teaching him, he waited for the rest. No one deserves the work, I added. You answer it, or you don't, that's all. He nodded again, the nod that doesn't perform. Then I'll answer. We stayed like that for a while, 3 people in a photo and a pile of paper that made a small mountain that would not melt. The night deepened. The lake's skin turned black again, a black that wasn't empty but full of quiet swimmers. A wind came up and moved the curtain like a gentle hand. I looked at my son. He did not look away. He had learned to hold a gaze again, the way he used to when he wanted me to see his drawings on the fridge. Tomorrow, I said, we'll go to the rail yard. You'll wear boots. You'll bring questions. You'll leave the phone in your pocket until a train has passed and the ground has stopped humming. Then you can take notes. He smiled, slow, like someone trying on a jacket he thought would itch and finding it fits. And the clinics? Next week, I said. Bring your mother's scarf. He frowned. Why? Because the rooms are cold, I said. On purpose. He laughed, soft and honest, the kind that doesn't ask to be heard. He reached for the silver pen again, weighed it in his hand, and set it down in the middle of the schedule, tip pointing at the date that had just become more than a square on a calendar. Tell me the number, he said suddenly, with none of the old push in it, only a straight request. I looked at him a long moment. He had earned it. The room had earned it. I gave it to him, just the digits, nothing else around them. He didn't repeat it, he didn't whistle, he only breathed once, deep. The glass almost slipped again. He caught it without looking. The tremble came and went through him like a small wave that knows the shape of the shore. He looked at the photo and then at me. I was wrong, he said, and there was no performance in it. About you, about what matters. Good, I said. Now be right about the next thing. He waited. About yourself, I said. About what you can be useful for. He nodded, slow as a tide turning. Outside, far across the water, a single light moved, patient and sure. We watched it without speaking, the way people watch a truth arrive from a distance, steady, inevitable, bright. We went at first light, the kind of morning that makes even tired streets look washed and new. He showed up at my door in sneakers, and I handed him boots that had learned the shape of mud. He made a face, then put them on. I didn't say much. The lake was gray and soft, the sky barely awake. We drove without the radio. It is good for a son to hear how silence sounds when a day is about to earn its keep. The rail yard sat behind a chain-link fence and a line of black trees, all steel and ballast and long, patient machines. Heat comes later in the day out there. At dawn, it's the cold that bites, the kind that lives in metal. A man named Rafik met us by the gate, cap pulled down, coffee in a paper cup, hands that looked like the tools he trusted. "This your boy?" he asked, and I nodded. My son lifted his chin at the word boy, then stopped himself and simply said, "Yes." Good. One small win already. We followed Rafik along the yard, the ground crunching under boots, air clean and sharp. He talked while we walked, not the talk of meetings, but the talk of work, short, exact, not looking for applause. "You hear it first," Rafik said, tapping a rail with his knuckle. The sound rang along the line like a quiet bell. Before a rail lies down, it talks. 5 minutes, maybe less. Men who haven't listened to rails don't believe it. Then they're the ones who make speeches when the track waves like seaweed. He looked at my son. "You hear it?" My boy blinked. "Hear what?" The difference, Rafiq said, between a rail that slept well and a rail that has a headache. My son smiled, small, respectful this time. Teach me, he said. Rafiq's eyes warmed a little. He tapped again. The sound was high, clean. He walked 20 paces, tapped again. The new sound had a tired edge, like a spoon on a cracked glass. Even my son heard it. He nodded once, and that nod meant more than any presentation he'd given in a room full of screens. We watched a long train move through the yard, the ground humming under our feet. My son put his hand on a post, feeling the vibration come up through metal into bone. It's like the world has a heartbeat, he said. It does, Rafiq answered. The trick is not to think yours is louder. He led us to the joint where two rails met. There, a man older than me knelt with a wrench, listening, then tightening, then listening again. My son kneeled too, the boots doing their first honest job of the day, and watched the man's hands. He didn't ask a question for once. He just watched. The world teaches when you stop trying to pass the test. We left the yard as the sun cleared the trees. Grease smell, cold iron, the quiet pride that hangs in air, where people fix things no one thanks them for. My son's face had changed by a small degree, the way a clock hand moves when you aren't looking. In the truck he sat without his phone in his hand. I didn't mention it. The morning had done some of my speaking for me. At the clinic, the air was different, detergent, the sour and sweet of worry, the thin whistle of a kettle in a back room. A woman in a gray shawl met us at the door, eyes sharp as needles, name badge tilted. Hadra? She sized my son up the way a head nurse sizes a volunteer who says he wants to help. Shoes off the mat, she said. He did it. Hands, she said, and he held them out and let her pour sanitizer into his palms like a blessing that bites. She led us past a line of mothers and a boy who showed his toy car to anyone who would look. The battery room was behind a locked door with a sign that said, "Keep cold." Inside, the hum was steady, the kind that makes you breathe slower. Big gray cabinets stood like quiet cows. Each had a green light, a simple star at the corner. This is what modern looks like, I said. He ran his fingers above a vent, felt the wash of air, looked at Hadra. What happens when it fails? He asked. It doesn't, she said, without smiling. That's the point. She opened a logbook on a shelf and showed him columns that were straighter than most roads. Checks, charges, temperatures, initials. Who keeps this? He asked. We do, she said, and the guardians. She pointed to a small window. Two old women sat at a table with tea and a radio, knitting between checks, eyes moving from wool to wool again. We pay them, I said, not as charity, as wages. They do real work. When the grid blinks, they don't. They sit, they watch, they guard. Hadra shut the book softly. Babies don't care about speeches, she said. They care about milk that stayed cold. That is what your father bought, not a photo on a wall. My son nodded, serious now. What will you have me do? He asked her, and I stepped back so the question could belong to them. She didn't answer at once. She looked him over, the way winter looks over a house to see where the wind will get in. Come Thursday nights, she said. We're short then. Watch for the delivery van. If it's late, call the driver. If he's stuck behind a train, call the yard. Learn their names. Bring tea when the guardians switch. Don't ask for a picture. He smiled, a little ashamed, a little relieved. All right, he said. Thursday nights. We left when noon came and the windows like bright water. Outside, the day was warmer and the town sounded like pans and horns and kids whooped free from a small test. At a stoplight, he looked at me and said, I think I thought money was noise. A lot of people do, I said. Noise is easier to hear than hum. He nodded. He watched a delivery bike slip between cars with a box strapped behind like a turtle shell. Huh, he said. Only that. We made one more stop on the way home, a warehouse where the air tasted like apples, and the ground was a map of yellow lines. Tarek, the manager, waved us up to a catwalk where you can see the whole floor at once. On time is the difference between ripe and rot, he said, gesturing at the whiteboards. See those dots? Each is a truck. Each dot has a driver. Each driver has a life. He turned to my son. Your father understands dots. You think you do. Come learn. He handed my boy a clipboard with a slot for a pen you couldn't lose because it was tied to the board with a string. Fancy people laugh at string. People who count on it don't. By afternoon, the lake shone like clean slate. We sat at the table again. No candles this time. Just the plain light that tells the truth without making a show of it. I put the silver pen on the wood between us, and a folder with documents I'd already drafted. He looked at the pen, then at me. "What am I signing?" he asked, not fearful, just careful. "An acceptance," I said. 3, actually. The first was a board seat for the Clinic Power Trust. The second was an advisory role with the Rail Yard Safety Committee. The third was a quarterly review post with the warehouse's inventory algorithm team. Because, yes, screens had a job when trucks were late. Each role paid, not much, enough to honor the hours. Each role came with a line that I wrote in plain words, subject to removal at the discretion of the work. He read that line twice. He smiled. "I like that," he said. "The work decides." "It always has," I said. "We're just usually too proud to admit it." He took the pen and signed his name without a flourish. He didn't try to make his signature bigger than it was. He finished and set the pen down, the nib pointing at the photo we had left on the table. "Your..." Mother smiled up at us from winter. "I'll do this," he said. "Not for the number, for the hum." It was a simple line. It might have been a prayer. Then I slid the last document over. "This one is mine," I said. "But you should read it." He scanned the first paragraph, and his mouth opened a little. It was an amendment to the trust, filed but not yet finalized, that clarified what would happen to the house after I was gone. It did not pass to him outright. It remained the retreat your mother imagined until 20 years had taught the town its quiet worth. After that, a decision could be made by a board that did not include anyone who ever ate at this table. He looked up sharply. "You're cutting me out," he said, the old heat trying to find air. I shook my head. "I'm cutting out the easy path," I said. "You wanted modern. Modern also means we don't treat inheritance like dessert. You are not a waiter waiting in a corner for a tray. You are a man with work to do while I am alive, and after. If you do it with clean hands, you won't need to own this house to live in a good one." He sat back, thinking, the way he used to think when a puzzle didn't solve itself in the first 5 seconds. His wife, who had been so quiet I almost forgot she was there, reached for his hand and squeezed. "It's right," she said, surprising both of us. "This place is bigger than us." She looked around as if seeing the small dents and old scratches for the first time as a kind of map. "We should bring flowers for the retreat when it starts." "Bring tea," I said. "Flowers droop. Tea works." She laughed and wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the softness that had snuck up on her. He let out a breath and looked at the window. The lake had gone still again, evening smoothing it into a sheet. "I was harsh to you," he said. "You were quiet back. That's heavy." "Quiet isn't empty," I said. "It's sharp when it needs to be." He nodded, and his eyes shone in a way that had nothing to do with light. He reached for the photo and turned it so it faced him directly. "Mom," he said, softly enough that I almost pretended I didn't hear it, "I'll earn the floor." I stood and went to the cedar room and came back with the wooden box. I took out her ring and set it on the table. "This stays with me," I said. "When the time comes, it goes to the retreat. It will live in a small frame by the door where the guardians can see it when they start their shift. That's what she would have wanted, for the ring that saw our vows to watch the door where people come for breath." He looked at the ring like it was a little moon, pulled by tides he couldn't see. "Then that's where it should go," he said. There was one last thread I had to pull steady. "Your venture," I said, naming it out loud so there would be no hiding. He stiffened, then lifted his chin and took the hit like a man. "We're not in good shape," he said. "Cash short, big promises, loud slides." I nodded. "I know," I said. "I read the filings." He blinked. "You..." "Quiet doesn't mean blind," I said. "The warehouse could use your software if it becomes humble enough to ask what the floor needs. Build for that, not for applause. If you do it clean, Tarek will give you a pilot. Not because you are my son, because the work wants it. If you come in with shoes that sound like speeches, he'll shut the door." He took that like medicine. "I'll come in boots," he said. "Good," I answered. "And with ears." Night gathered at the edges of the glass. The first star came on like a switch in a house across the water. We cleared the table together, 3 pairs of hands, 1 rhythm. He washed, I dried, she stacked. Small work, big heat. The kitchen smelled like soap and bread and the good kind of tired. We didn't talk about numbers anymore. We didn't need to. The hum had settled into the bones of the house. Before they left, he stood near the door and looked back at the room, the way you look at a person after a hard conversation that somehow made you bigger. "I said you were done," he said. "I was trying to push you out of my way so I didn't have to see that my way was crooked." I shrugged. "Straight is a habit," I said. "You can learn it." He nodded. He put his hand on my shoulder. Not a boy's grip, not a man's attempt to win. Just a hand from a son to a father who had shown him a wall that doesn't fall. "Thursday," he said. "I'll be there." "The Guardians will be ready," I said. He smiled, a real one, the kind that starts in the eyes. They walked to their car. He opened the door for his wife without looking to see if I saw. He had learned to do one thing before he worried about who was watching. The engine started. The lights traced 2 white lines down the drive and then turned, steady, back toward a town that had work waiting. The lake breathed. The house listened. I stood a while in the doorway, like a man hearing the last note of a song his wife taught him. Inside, I set the photo back in its place and the silver pen in the box. I turned the lamp down, and the room became a softer kind of true. I touched the table where the wine had almost spilled and where it hadn't. I thought of my boy's voice across the wood, the cruel line he had carried in like a knife, the way it had dulled against the grain and then been put away. I thought of the first bicycle, the first fever, the first lie, the first truth said out loud. I thought of the old rule she gave me. Show him the shape of it. I had. Not with noise, with walls, with humming. If you're still here, if you felt the lake wind and the rail's quiet ring and the clinic's steady lights, tell me where you're listening from. Your street, your small kitchen, your own table with its own scratches. Tell me what hum keeps you going. And if this story held you, if it reminded you of a hand you wish you could hold again, or a word you need to say in a calm voice, then like, share, comment, and subscribe so more people can sit at this table with us and hear how quiet can be strong.